Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stretch Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support tier list for 11.3. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream every night starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually go till about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on YouTube. So very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I try to explain as much as I can about what's going on in the game while also holding a chat and trying to answer every single comment that people make in the chat. So come by, check it out. It's a great time. And if you enjoy this type of content, be sure to check out the rest as well. I'm going to start doing a tier list for each role on every patch, as well as in-depth patch notes. Then I'm going to be adding a lot more individual champion guides for all of your favorite champions, and then topical guides like best one trick, how to micro better, how to macro better, and tons more on the main page, so be sure to check all that out. And as you can see, I've switched it up a little bit here. I've tried to be a little more visually appealing by creating one of these tier lists with the graphics, and then I'm also going to try to do it a bit faster. I know that's always a meme on the channel, but I'm going to go as fast as I can and try to talk about as many different kinds of champions as I can. So if you want a more in-depth analysis, feel free to come by, drop by the stream, ask me some questions. I'm happy to let you know what I think are the best current builds for the champ, you know, how they fit into the meta, and just anything else that you want to talk about. Or check out some in-depth champion guides. I just released a Maokai guide earlier this week, and I know I've done a Leona guide and a Rakan guide so far for Season 11 as well, and I'm probably going to be adding some more soon, so check all that out. But anyways, switching it up, let me know what you think in the comments about this faster, more visually appealing style, let's just go ahead and get into it. Okay, so I think that Maokai is still going to be number one overall for solo queue. He's really strong. I've been playing him a ton on the stream, so if you want to know more about him, definitely come by and check that out. But he's just a really unique champion that works extremely well with the items and runes that are popular right now, and he works very well against a lot of the champions that are popular right now out there in the meta. So the things that make him the most unique, first of all, are the seeds, right? They do a ton of damage, around 600 damage or so, even off of, you know, virtually no items in the mid game once you get them maxed out. So it's a ton of damage. They last forever, usually around 40 seconds or more, and they apply a 2-second slow that's non-decaying. So they just have a ton of utility, give you a lot of vision, so it's just supreme control around the dragons and the barons, which is where most fights are going to take place. Just very, very difficult to try to walk there and take out Maokai, and you can't do anything about those seeds, or it's very difficult to do anything about them, because you can't sweep them with the sweeper, you just have to outrun them, which most champions are going to have some sort of dash, or they're going to have like mobility boots, or use mana to speed up, if they even know the seeds are there. So it's very, very difficult to deal with that. And then he has pretty high base stats as well. Like, he's got 335 base movement speed, I think 580 base health, and his base magic is, or his base mana is like 400, which is pretty high for a tank. So he's just got a really good sort of stat stick champion, and he can take Aftershock. So he still does a ton of damage with his seeds, but because of that Aftershock, he can actually serve as a decent peeling champion as well with your ultimate to sort of tie everyone up in team fights, and you have your W for that point-click piece of CC, which is fantastic. So he's very difficult to blow up through Aftershock, and because a lot of the items he's going to be getting are going to have like a decent amount of health, and just his base stats are pretty high. He's a fantastic hybrid of peeler tank plus basically poke control mage with his seeds. So it's a really unique combination that not a lot of other champions can pull off. So you still want to go Mandate on him. Mandate was nerfed fairly recently, but it still does about the same amount of damage on him, maybe minus like 10% or so, but just super strong. Gives him the mana regen, gives him the little bit of extra damage, and gives your team that extra movement speed in team fights, which is going to be very good. And then the new Putrefier that's coming out on this patch, I think is going to be fantastic on him. You got to make sure that you take Font of Life to trigger it, because whenever you get Font on somebody, whenever one of your allies attacks them, that counts as a heal from you, which does trigger the Putrefier for that 60% healing debuff, which is very big. And then the stats themselves are just great for him. The extra mana regen for even more seeds, ability haste, more seeds. Then the little bit of extra AP is going to make your abilities hit just a little bit harder, and it's only 2,300 gold, which is very nice. You can do Morellonomicon if you want. That is going to give you more health. It is going to give you more AP, so that'll give you survivability. The AP is okay. His ratios aren't fantastic. They did nerf the ratio on the seeds back in 11.2. But it's also a little bit more gold at 2,500. You don't have the mana regen, you don't have the ability haste. So I really like the Putrefier. It's a lot easier to trigger the 60% as well. The other item that a lot of people get on him is Demonic Embrace. Now, this item is very strong if you do complete it. but it is 3,000 gold, so it's going to leave you a little bit weaker between that 15 to 25 minute mark while you're trying to complete this item. Maybe not 25, maybe like 22 minutes, but you're going to be a lot weaker in that mid game versus the Putrefier is going to give you that pop immediately. And the Putrefier also makes it so that your ADC doesn't have to buy Executioners. Your mid laner doesn't have to get Morellos. So that basically puts an extra 800 gold in the pocket of your ADC, which obviously is going to be really, really powerful. It's almost like giving your ADC 2 or 3 kills. So, very, very good champion overall. There aren't that many rough matchups. If they do have some big tanks that can go through the seeds, so stuff that's going to get like Force of Nature or Spirit Visage, so like your Udyr, maybe your Skarners. Force of Nature is getting buffed on this patch. Obviously, stuff like Mundo, just anything that's going to get some big magic resist items might be able to shrug off your seeds, or something like Ivern that can check the bushes with Daisy, or things like Zyra that can check bushes with plants and trigger your seeds. Like, there are some ways that can be a little annoying, but the fact that you're not just a one-trick pony type of champion, right? In the sense that you have other stuff going on than just the seeds. The seeds are good, but you still function pretty well as just a champ that has a lot of CC and can peel well. So, very good champ. If you want to know more, go watch the in-depth guide I just released earlier this week, but I still think he'll be somewhere near, if not at the very top, he should be near the top on most people's tier list. Seraphine's still going to be pretty strong as well. She is getting nerfed on this patch primarily, a little bit less damage on her notes for the auto attack, which is okay. And then her shield is going to be a little bit less powerful for both her and her allies, so she's going to be a little easier to kill. But she's still going to have fantastic harassment in the early game with the Q spam, with the E. And then she has fantastic engage, and that's what really sets her apart from a lot of the other enchanters out there, is that she has a pretty long range engage. And that's what champions like Janna, Lulu, Nami, they're just not as good at starting fights as Seraphine is if you can aim that ult properly and get it off. And then she just gives a ton of buff to her allies, right? Between Moonstone, Staff of Flowing Water, her W speeding everyone up, giving you a shield, offering that extra heal. It's just a ton of utility. So really good bully in the early game. She can take a lot of protection as well. So she can have Guardian and Barrier usually, and she has her W. So it's actually surprisingly difficult to blow her up unless you're really, really fed if she has all of her cooldowns available. And because you can take something like Ionian Boots plus Cosmic Insight, which I really like on her, then those summoners are going to be up more often, so you're going to have less windows of vulnerability, and you're going to get those free boots so you can accelerate into that Moonstone faster. So I think she's a fantastic champion right now. She can be flexed to 3 different roles, 80 carry, support, and mid laner. Now, the nerfs will bring her down a little bit, maybe like 1%, maybe 1.5%, but I still think she's going to be a super strong option. Is going to be a little weak to some of the all-in champs, so like if they have a Blitzcrank, or I don't even know if Thresh is going to do enough damage outside of the very, very early game to kill her. She's just a real terror. So unless you have assassins or just stuff and you're really willing to hard commit to dive her on that backline and try to blow her up, she's going to be a really strong champ right now. Very, very good against something like Rel, who's becoming increasingly popular right now. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about Rel. So Rel really has risen to prominence just over the last patch or two, and I don't even think she got any buffs. People just got better at playing her. And I'll be fully honest, I don't understand why she's so strong with a lot of the stuff that she does. People are just learning some of these combos where you can engage with either form. You can either jump off and be the slow form, which is how I thought she would engage most of the time, but jumping on, so starting off in slow form and then jumping on the horse to flip people over you and get that little 1-second stun. Can actually be pretty strong too, and that does allow you, if you're in horse form, to activate your ult and pull them back into your team easier, and this allows you to get out of the situation a lot better, because I was concerned when you dismounted, when she was first revealed, when you dismounted to knock somebody up, that you were just going to be stuck. You were too slow and you're just going to get blown up. But if you go in horse form, then that does allow you to get out of the situation a little bit better. But if you do want to stick in there, then being in tank form can be helpful as well. So she's just really strong, especially at peeling. So great matchup into stuff like Leona, like Nautilus. It's going to be fantastic. Now, she can get outscaled a little bit by enchanters if you're not careful, but she does engage surprisingly well, especially in that horse form if she transforms, because she gets that extra movement speed to run in there, and you can even take something like a turbo chem tank if you want to make sure that you're going to be able to get that engage. So I think that she is a lot stronger than people thought she was, including myself. People just had to practice her and learn her and get some of the combinations, because once you flip them and then you stun them with your E, that's like 2 seconds of stun, and then you can R, and if they don't have a flash or a dash to get out of it, then they're basically going to be CC'd forever, right? They're going to be dead by the time they wake up out of that, and she's just very, very difficult to kill. She has really high stats. So great champ. You can either go Kim Tank or you can go Locket on her. I think those are the primary choices. And then as secondaries, they are buffing up Frozen Heart, which I think could be very good on her. Haven't really played her a ton, so I don't know about her mana management, but they are lowering the cost of Frozen Heart on this patch by 200 gold to 2,500 at the cost of 10 armor, and that's going to bring you some extra attack speed reduction, which will help out your entire team. Lots of armor, which is going to be very handy, and then you get the 20% ability haste, which is good, and you get the extra auto attack damage reduction, which does add up in a longer fight. So I think she's going to be fantastic right now. You do have to practice her. You do have to know what you should be choosing to do in different situations, but she is very, very strong right now. She's like a 53 or 54% win rate, I believe. She may have dropped a little bit. She was like super high at the start of the patch. No, she's still there. She's around 54. So you got to get used to her. It's a little counterintuitive, but and some of her combos do feel a little weird, but overall, going to be a super strong champ. And then Leona really shouldn't be a surprise to too many people. Just fantastic engage. Still a 90-second cooldown on that engage. They still haven't nerfed her. So great engage. Excellent survivability early on with her W. Not only giving you extra armor and magic resist, but also reducing incoming damage by a set amount, a very flat amount. So that's very good at taking minion aggro early and not getting blown up. And then she gives a decent amount of damage to her team, too, with those sunlight procs. I talked about that in the Leona guide, so be sure to watch that if you want more info. She does a hell of a lot of damage early, and she can engage through the minions at a pretty long range. I believe her E range is like 900. So she's just always a threat. You really have to respect it. That all-in early on if you're not confident that you're going to be able to beat it. And this has really low cooldowns on a high amount of CC. Her Q has a 5-second cooldown with even 1 point in it. And then her E, which is what you max second, is going to get down to a 6-second cooldown. And there's so much extra CDR in the game with your first item giving you 20%, and then your second item if you choose to get Zeke's or Frozen Heart. I think Frozen Heart will be pretty good on her too. Giving you another 20%, then you can take 8% from runes. You can very easily, just off of 2 big items, get to 33% CDR, which is phenomenal because in Season 10, you could really only get to 20% CDR if you went for Zeke's and Knight's Vow. That's if you didn't do Locket, and Locket was pretty good in some situations in Season 10. So anyways, that's one of the major drivers behind why tanks are so much better. I mean, she was really good in Season 10, let's be honest. She and Nautilus were really, really good. But now they've just kind of cranked it into overdrive because they have so much CDR, and it's just basically perma-stuns in fights off of that much CDR on her. So she's still going to be very strong. Kind of bad matchup into Rel. Rel can just soak up her engage. She's going to be mega tanky, and then Rel is just going to have probably more damage. It's going to be very close. But Rel just seems like she's just very good at countering her. She can just, jump on the AD carry and then lock up the AD carry with the E and then pull both of you back into the team. And it just feels like Rel is a really, really good matchup into her. So you got to be careful with that one. I would consider banning Rel if you're considering playing her. She does have a pretty good matchup into Seraphine, especially in the early game, because Seraphine doesn't have a great way to deal with your ult and your E. All she can do is just hope that her Guardian plus Barrier is going to be enough to where you don't kill her. And then the Maokai matchup is kind of tough. If you can actually get on him or the AD carry, you might be able to deal with it, but he does take Aftershock, and he can peel really well, and those seeds are definitely going to out-damage you later. So, her matchups into a lot of the other top-end picks, at least the Rel and the Maokai, are going to be a little rough, but she's very good against the rest of the field, and she's pretty good against Seraphine as well. So, maybe slightly more situational than she was a couple of patches ago, but she's still going to be pretty good. Okay, then dropping down into A tier, I think Nautilus is going to be really good. He's already pretty solid. He has a really big hitbox on his Q, so open field, it's really nice to hit it. He can't go through minions like Leona. He can't go over walls, so it does make it kind of more difficult to snowball your advantage if you get ahead and if you get that vision advantage on somebody. But his R is fantastic. You can't outplay it. You can't dodge it. It's pretty good guaranteed engage. And if you do take Frozen Heart on this patch, I think he's going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries because he really hurts for mana, which is why he's fallen off a little bit in Season 11 compared to something like a Leona is that his E was the best thing to spam in theory, but it costs like 90 mana every time you do it if you max that out. So that does make it pretty rough on him. Mana-wise, but with the extra mana off of Frozen Heart, you might be able to get a couple more points in your E. If mana is still going to be hard to come by, you can always max your Q first, which is going to give you much more burst and initial damage, and it's going to allow you to fish for more hooks if you're A-ramming with your team. But it's going to give you a lot less team fight damage, which is really what he was kind of known for with his E spam in fights. So, still pretty good. Premier Engage. Decent matchup into something like a Leona, sort of a skill matchup, because he can interrupt her E with his Q if he times it correctly. But yeah, he's just a little bit lower than I think the big four, but nevertheless, he's going to be pretty solid. And then Rakan, I think, is still going to be good. I did drop him out of S tier down into A tier. He does have really long cooldowns, which feels kind of bad in the early game, and his damage is going to be low in the early game, so it's harder to like get kills and snowball a lead early. But you do have nice trades with your W and then E into E. Like, you can definitely put a lot of damage on people. And if you get him poked down to 50% or so, he definitely can finish them off. So, the big thing about Rakan is that he scales like an enchanter, but he has the engage of a tank, which is very nice. So he can still get stuff like Staff of Flowing Water. He can get Mandate, make very good use of those. He can get the Putrefier, make very good use of those. Which is something that the tanks have a hard time with, right? Outside of Maokai, a lot of these, well, in Seraphine, like Rel, Leona, and Nautilus all have a hard time getting Grievous Wounds that are going to be effective. Like, you can get Bramble Vest, but they have to actually be hitting you to get the Grievous Wound effect. And if you go all the way into Thornmail, that does help you out in terms of whenever you CC them, it puts 60% on them. But that's a 2,700 gold item. And you're giving up other collateral costs, like you're giving up your Frozen Heart, you're giving up your Zeeks or your Knight's Vow or something like that to afford it. Versus with the Putrefier, it has really nice stats. It's got AP on it, it's got some extra mana regen, and it's only 2,300 gold. So I feel like it's much easier to pull that off. So Rakan might actually really like that item. It's got the AP on, it's got the mana regen, it's got the ability haste, which he really loves, and then it's got the 60% on it as well if you heal somebody. And because he takes the Font of Life, and he just naturally has the shields off of his E, then you could put that on a bunch of different people. So I think that going Mandate into Putrefier, kind of like with Maokai, could be a pretty decent option on Rakan as well. That is, you know, substituting for your Staff of Flowing Water, but getting, you know, all of those good stats, especially ability haste. Staff of Flowing Water does not have ability haste on it, which really, really sucks because Rakan has very powerful cooldowns, but they're long. Right, so like it's 12 seconds on his E, 12 seconds on his W, even once they're maxed out. So he has an amazing kit, but it's just those cooldowns really gate him. So you really want to get as much CDR as you possibly can on Rakan. And you can pretty comfortably get to almost 40% CDR if you take Ionian Boots, Mandate, and then Putrefier. That's going to be 60% right there. And then you can get 8 off of the runes. That's going to be like 68 ability haste, which is coming pretty close to 40% CDR. I'm not sure the exact math on that. But that is something that could really benefit him pretty heavily with the Putrefier. Nevertheless, he does lack the snowball potential early, and he's a very high skill cap champion. Not as high as something like Thresh, but he's pretty difficult for a lot of people to play. So I went ahead and dropped him down a little bit, although I think that he does potentially have a really good matchup into something like a Rel. The Malachi is a really hard matchup, but I think in a Rel it could be pretty decent, and maybe into Seraphine in the early game if you don't get caught with her ultimate. So that's kind of a rough one. And then the Leona Nautilus is kind of a skill matchup. Historically, a lot of people think that Leona Nautilus beat Rakan if you can lock him down with your CC, but he can also counter your engage pretty well with his ult plus E combo to, you know, really nullify your engage on a key target, and then he's just going to outscale you in team fights because he's got shields and he scales with plus healing and shielding in a lot of fights. So anyways, I think that he is very good, but his sort of his positioning in the meta is a little sketchy. It just kind of depends on how good you are and what you're up against. He's very, very good at protecting people against assassins, though. So, like, if you're playing, you know, Rel, like, that's all good and everything, but if they have a Zed that's mega fed and they just jump on your AD carry's dead. Like, you can't do anything about it. Versus with Rakan, if you put a big shield on him with Guardian, with your ultimate to charm him and CC him, and then your Q to heal your AD carry, you might actually be able to help your AD carry live through some of those assassins. So it just really depends on the matchup and how good you are on Rakan. But I think that he definitely deserves to be at least tier 2. Okay, and then Alistar is the next one that I'll mention. Now, I have Ali a little bit lower than some other lists might have him. Some people might have him up at tier 1. I know he's very popular in pro, and he does bring some unique things to the table, especially in the early game. So he's got a heal, so he can deal with some of these harassment champions like your Seraphines, your Brands, your Zyras, and stuff like that. Like, he can eat that harass and deal with it a little bit better than some of the other ones. He also has high base health regen and just high HP regen in general, which is very handy. And his WQ can engage through the minion wave. Much like Leona, he can sort of start a fight anytime, anywhere. And if you do take Phase Rush, which is a very common build on him, you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to get that follow-up stun, which is going to be pretty nice. So, yeah, Premier Engage, good sustain. He can also split up his combo in order to peel, so you can use your W to knock people away or your Q to otherwise displace people that are trying to charge. So there is a little bit of, you know, a pretty decent amount of skill to try to decide, do you want to go for the full combo, the WQ, or do you just want to like Q and then wait and W and knock somebody somewhere else? Do you want to like W and knock someone out of the Dragon Pit or the Baron Pit? So there's a lot, or just like knock them into a wall in the lane and then wait that little extra half a second and then Q and knock them up. So there's a lot of play to him. So he's not as hard as something like a Thresh, once again, but there are some decisions he can be tricky. The one place where he starts to fall short, in my opinion, as the game goes on, is his ultimate really doesn't do a lot to help your team. Yes, you are basically unkillable, but let's face it, Leona and Rel are also going to be unkillable with Aftershock, with a couple of items in a team fight. And he just doesn't have that CC, right? He doesn't have the Rel, you know, or the Leona or the Nautilus. All of them are just going to do way more in a team fight. He does have very good, like, engage if you flank to just run in and WQ. Like, it's hard to outplay that a lot of times. But he just doesn't have the scaling, and his CC is going to be a lot less than some of these other big tanks. So I think in pro, he can be very good if you just want that, like, guaranteed, you know, flash WQ, like, hard engage. Or in solo queue, if you grab those Moby boots and you make some really good roam timings and you're pretty confident that your AD carry is not going to feed when you leave the lane, it's really tough to be confident in that. A lot of times, if you're not duoed with an AD carry, if you're duoed with an Ezreal or something who can just like 1v2 and just hold his own in the lane, yeah, it's great. But, you know, if your AD carry locks Vayne or something like that, and they're up against Misfortune Leona, and you try to roam as Alistar, your AD carry is virtually guaranteed dead. So it's really tough to play with that hard roam playstyle early on in Alistar, especially the lower the elo goes, because your AD carry won't adjust and play appropriately. So he's kind of a risky pick in my mind. He is very good in the early game, and he can totally take over. He can tower dive super well early on also, especially if you have phase rush, but it's just the lack of the power in the W. Yes, you are unkillable, but I feel like the other stuff, like I said, is similarly difficult to kill and brings more utility. So anyways, I have him in tier 2. You could definitely make an argument if we're talking like Challenger or Pro, maybe he's tier 1, even though his win rate in Pro is not great. It's not horrible. Last time I looked, it was like 48%, but it wasn't like amazing considering how often he's picked. Okay, and then Lulu's the next one that I want to mention here. So Lulu is, I think, one of the best enchanters right now at buffing up your team and just playing around a lot of the stuff that's coming into the meta right now. Like, she can use Moonstone really well, plus Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent Censer. Ardent Censer doubles down on your attack speed because your W gives a lot of extra attack speed as well, and you benefit very heavily from having attack speed because of picks. Hi, Rory, what are you doing? You hanging out? Good job, Rory. Are you a cat today? Hey, why don't you go take this and go show mommy? Yeah, go show mommy in the playroom. Why don't you, Rory, go show mommy this new toy in the playroom. She wants to see it in the playroom.
But I think she's downstairs.
I think she's gonna come up and play with this in the playroom. But anyway, so I think that like she's very good with a lot of the items that are currently there. She can harass decently well in the laning phase, just with point click E, you can't miss it, and then Q puts out some pretty decent harass. And then you can deal with a lot of these kind of like highly mobile assassin types of champs with this polymorph later. So like Echo, Camille, Riven, like a lot of those types of champs that rely very heavily on lifesteal or mobility or just something else. You can shut that down with polymorph and then blow them up before they get to do their thing. So that's really nice. And then your ultimate, in the past I've kind of critiqued Lulu a little bit because your ultimate didn't scale with plus healing and shielding, so it just got outscaled by stuff, you know, like Janna and some of those other ults out there that scaled a lot better with that. But the fact that it's not considered a heal is actually very advantageous right now because it's not going to be cut by the Grievous Wounds. So that means that it actually has a lot of extra utility over something like a Soraka or a Janna who's just going to get cut off. Honey, can you take her in the other room with that, please?
Why don't we go in the play?
Yeah, go in the playroom, and then, yeah, you can show her your other toys, too. Take this in the playroom. You show her your other new toys, too. Rory just got a lot of new toys today, and she's excited about them. But anyway, so I think that that's really handy. So some things that had been a handicap to her before is actually pretty strong on her, and the fact that it's on a low cooldown, and she scales super well with CDR. So kind of like what I was talking about with Leona and such. She has Leona doesn't have long cooldowns, but tanks scale with CDR. So does Lulu, because her most powerful ability, that Whimsy, I believe, is a 12-second cooldown early on, and now with all of this CDR, the fact that if you go for a Putrefier build, kind of like what I was talking about with Rakan, you can get to 40% CDR off of your first two items now. You just have the Ionians, your Moonstone, and then Putrefier, and then you have the rune that gives you the CDR, and boom, you're at 40% CDR off of two items in your boots, which is crazy. Like, that's really, really good. Now, yes, you are giving up Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent to do that, but you're also, you know, pretty much permanently giving 60% anti-healing, and you like all the stats just like Rakan does. So I think that she's in a pretty good spot, and she can increase the speed of her allies very consistently with the W. So the Whimsy, once again, is huge. It's going to give the extra movement speed and the extra attack speed. So if you have something like an Olaf or a Darius or a Hecarim or whatever, you don't have great engage yourself, but at least you can enable other bruiser type of champions to start operating as a more consistent engage. So that is something really nice that a lot of the other enchanters are sort of lacking, is they may not have that way to, you know, start a fight. So Seraphine has her ult, which is good. She also has a speed up with her W, but Lulu can Whimsy people in there too. So the main reason why you would play Lulu then is it's just that polymorph, which is just a great piece of CC or a great buff. The extra damage that you hand out with picks on high attack speed champions, and your ultimate being able to, you know, add in that knock up on a low cooldown and give that quick infusion of health that gets around Grievous Wounds. So I think that she's going to be pretty solid right now, especially with the Putrefier buffs. And then Nami is still going to be really good, I think, early on, because she has some of the highest kill threat of any of the enchanters. If you do land that bubble, you probably can kill people with most AD carries. She works very well with Mandate, which is what you'll still want instead of Moonstone on her, I believe, because that just it doubles down on what her kit is trying to do, which is control movement. So if you put the E on your AD carry and you have Font of Life and someone auto attacks, that slow counts as coming from you. It's going to put Font on them, and then it's also going to trigger Mandate, which means that your AD carry is going to get 20% extra movement speed to run down the target, and it's also going to be slowing the target by 30%. And you're putting your passive on them, which is going to give them an extra 40% movement speed. So you're just basically just super speeding up your team and super slowing down the enemy team, and you're adding this extra on-hit damage with the Mandate and your E. It just all works very, very well together. So she's got the kill threat, she has the CC, she has the great synergy with Mandate, pretty good synergy with Ardent Censer and Staff of Flowing Water or Putrefier. She has kind of long cooldowns as well with Bubble and her E, so maybe she's going to like the Putrefier also. So I think she's pretty solid. Doesn't scale quite as hard as some of the other champs, but she is one of the few that does have that hard CC that can hit multiple targets with the bubble. It's just sort of hard to land against fast-moving targets, so not going to be as strong against things like Echo, Camille, Riven, that type of stuff as Lulu is, who just point-click, you really can't miss. But it does have, like, against immobile targets especially, or wombo combos, you know, Orianna pulls everyone in and you hit them with a bubble or something. There's much higher upside, but it's a lot riskier to try to get value out of it. Okay, moving down a little bit here, we have Yuumi. So Yuumi she can feel like extremely overpowered later on. There's just so many games, and I'm sure y'all are familiar with this as well, where you just feel like you shut her down in lane. She's like 0-5. You know, her AD carries down 30 CS, they're 0-3, and then somehow you don't close out the game by 25 minutes. She gets, you know, the classic Staff of Flowing Water plus Moonstone, Then you can throw in Ardent Sensor on top of that, and it just feels like you just lost the game because Yuumi attaches to her Darius top lane who went 5-0 in lane, right? So it's like if anyone on your team does well at all and they're a carry champion and you just attach to him as Yuumi in the mid game, you just like completely like can take over the game even if you got completely smashed in lane. So I think she's just a very risky champion. In the right circumstances, she feels super OP because you can't really pick her off, which if she's attached to one of these meatball champs, you know, like an Irelia, Darius, Garen, and you're still going to see a lot of those types of champs, Udyr, Skarner, really, really hard to deal with in the mid to late game if they have Yuumi attached, because she's going to give the extra movement speed, attack speed, extra AD, extra AP, Moonstone healing, Staff of Flowing Water buffs, Ardent Sensor buffs, all of these things. You know, she just got a truckload of buffs. She scales harder than probably any other enchanter in the game right now in terms of just the sheer amount of buffs that she can hand out to people. So she still does have some mana problems, especially early on. Her spells are ridiculously expensive. Yes, she is still really vulnerable to all-ins in the early game. That's another thing, is she has a really good teamfight ultimate as well. So, yes, she's vulnerable. Yes, she's not good at YOLO Q, where people are running around constantly getting picked off. Yes, her vision control is arguably the worst in the game. Like, you have to have someone go help you get vision, or you're just absolute sitting duck to get blown up. But in the right circumstances, she can feel super dangerous. So that's why she's my top pick of tier 3, because super risky, but, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of the amount of power that she can give her team in the mid to late game, if she can survive and if anyone's doing all right on your team. And then she could feel completely worthless, right? If everyone on your team's just chain feeding, you're down 0-10, like, there's pretty much no way you're coming back. Versus if you were playing something like Leona, you might be able to find a really good pick, you know, and cut somebody off, and, you know, you have some playmaking potential. Yuumi is just, like, you have a little bit with your R, but you're very dependent on your teammates, like, positioning and being able to do something with the power you're giving them. Okay, and then Shaco's the more interesting one that I put up here, and I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to have to watch some more videos. I am intrigued. He is interesting to play, but I've been seeing him a lot more in solo queue, and his win rate has been rising steadily over the last few patches, and it's, like I said, I have to study it to see, but he's at like a 53% win rate right now, and he has a 3% play rate, so he's not like ultra popular, but he's a little more popular than you might expect, right? Like, his play rate is just like a little bit under Bard and Rel right now, so, you know, he's getting picked a decent amount, and he has several things going for him that I think are some of the reasons why he's better. Now, he did get buffed on his backstab, does a little bit more damage than it used to. Sorry, I'm not sure how much y'all can hear from the other room, but I guess we'll just go ahead and play through this. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and shut the door. Just give me 5 seconds here. Because sometimes I can't hear them because I have my headphones on. But then it's actually a lot louder. Y'all can hear him in the other room. So I'm sure most people probably don't mind. But anyways, I'll shut the door. But he has actually decent starting stats, right? Like, his health is, you know, 590. His health regen's about 9, which is okay. His armor's on the low side, but it's higher than enchanters are. He has kind of low mana with 300. So he's got a bit higher stats than you might think just looking at him. He's definitely a bit more sturdy. I think he has more health than, like, Maokai early on. So he's tankier than people might think in the very early game. And there are a lot of just little interactions, and once again, I'm going to have to study it, but one of the main reasons is this Jack in the Box has pretty good CC, up to a 1.5 second stun, pretty much, that can hit multiple targets and team fights, and puts out pretty good damage. If it's against a single target, it's 35 every half a second, so 70 per second, and I think it lasts for... I don't remember. Lasts for 2 seconds. It might even last longer than that. It lasts for a hell of a long time when it comes up. So it can hit people for quite a lot. I feel like it stealths for 2. Does it not say how long it lasts, or is it down here? Okay, it doesn't say how long it lasts. But it basically can do 35 per half a second, so 70 per second. So if they sit in it for 2 seconds... and that's just at the early levels. It's 95 per half a second. So later on, if they sit in this for 1 second when you max your boxes, then it's going to be 200 damage per second that they're in this. So this is pretty good. So if they're in it for 3 seconds, that's about the equivalent of a Maokai seed. But instead of a slow, it also has a fear, which is pretty good. It does last for a decent amount of time, 40 plus 5% of your AP. So it can stay out there for quite a while. And, the big difference, once again, is it can fear multiple targets. Then you have this 2-shift poison, which applies a slow for 3 seconds, non-decaying. So that's a pretty big slow, honestly. This is what people max out first. I believe they max the E, then they max the box. And that's going to be a 30% slow. And it's on an 8-second cooldown. And it's going to do, if they're low on health, it does 255 damage with a 0.82 ratio. So that's pretty decent. And then it also empowers your backstab if you attack people from behind to do pretty good damage. Then your Deceive, obviously, is going to make you almost impossible to gank. It allows you to get really sneaky engages on people, especially in skirmishes. And if you time your Deceive and use it correctly with your Hallucinate, you can make your clone appear in the middle of a team fight, and people are going to think that it's the actual you a lot of times if you perform this well. So they might just automatically start wasting all of their cooldowns on your clone. So he's extremely difficult to play correctly. I think in a lot of circumstances, just how you're managing your clone, how you're trying to fake people out, where you're putting your boxes, and there's like little details too. Like you can actually hold on to your Hallucinate also, and I believe for like half a second whenever you activate it, then you're invulnerable to all damage. I don't think they took that out, but I believe you're invulnerable to all damage for like half a second whenever you activate it. So you can use that to block like really big pieces of damage like a Carthazol. Let me know in the comments if they took that off, but I know that that definitely used to be a thing whenever you activated the hallucination. But anyway, and the damage is real. I mean, when this thing explodes, it's like 225 base damage. Then you have all these boxes going everywhere, and it causes everyone to flee. So he's just really disruptive in team fights. People just aren't sure if they should use cooldowns on it or not. The clone does pretty decent damage when it auto attacks if you don't kill it and get rid of it. It's got decent CC. So it's just a really tricky, sneaky champion who does a surprising amount of damage even in team fights off of that clone. So you do have to play him correctly. He does take a lot of practice, which is why I have him a little bit lower. Probably won't see him in pro, but he is decent. And he's good into engaged champions. So into things like Nautilus or Leona or Rakan. It's actually pretty difficult if you play around your boxes or if your AD carry plays around your box, because if you try to dive in, that fear is a displacement. It will knock you out of the air and you will stop moving and run backwards. So you do not get to complete whatever action you're trying to do. It's really, really annoying because I've tried to run in with Rakan before and, W to hit the AD carry, and then all of a sudden I'm feared and it just like ruins my entire engage. So it's pretty good. And I think the box, I believe it can block hooks. I'm not 100%, but at least while it's arming, I think it can block hooks like a Zyra plant, although I'm not 100% about that. So you might be able to drop a box in front of somebody and, soak a Nautilus hook or a Blitzcrank hook. But anyway, so very sneaky, good against engages, and, a lot of the new items are pretty good on him too. The same kind of stuff that's good on Maokai, basically. So Mandate, because you have so many slows off of your E, off of your boxes. You can Mandate really easily, which is going to give you that movement speed to get in and out of combat really well. He's going to love the CDR because he has long cooldowns. His box is 16 seconds. I think Deceive is like 12 seconds or so. So having all that extra CDR, having the extra movement speed off of Mandate, being able to take Demonic Embrace, which, with all of your traps, constantly auto-attacking, and you being able to keep spamming Shiv on them and all that kind of stuff, you're going to keep that Demonic Embrace burning, which can be really handy. Now, I don't know if Putrefier is going to be as good on him. Probably not. So you probably just want to go for the full-on Morello if you want to get that type of thing on him. Or you can just get Oblivion Orb and sit on it. He does have a few different options, and he is a pretty decent champ over time. Very similar, like Malachi Jr., I would call him, right? So his traps are on a longer cooldown. Malachi's seeds are 10 seconds. Shaco's traps are 16 seconds. The traps could deal more damage in the right kind of circumstance, but just that quick damage, if someone runs out of the traps, Malachi's seeds are going to do more. They can also be swept, or detected with control wards and cleared versus the seeds can't. And Maokai is just going to have much more consistent CC overall. But Shaco is probably going to have more like burst and sort of rundown potential and better engage and access to the back line. So you can open up with the clones on the back line and potentially kill the enemy AD carry. Or like just really, you know, even if they don't kill your clone immediately, if they realize it's the clone, they're still going to have to run away. And you can chase them with the clone. So they're still going to be out of it, not doing DPS for, you know, like 4 or 5 seconds while they're trying to run away and kite that clone. So I think if you play him well, he does have a ton of potential, but he is extremely difficult to maximize, as I said before. So that's why I've got him down here. If you're a really good Shaco player, you can probably be tier 1 or tier 2, maybe even tier 1 if you're a god like Shaco. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on to Thresh, because I do want to try to, you know, at least get this done in 45, 50 minutes here. Thresh is still pretty good. You know, he's a huge beneficiary of CDR, just like a lot of these other champs I've mentioned. He has kind of longer cooldowns, so he's going to love the CDR. But his hook in particular is really, really good with CDR, because if you hit a target, it reduces the hook cooldown by a flat 3 seconds. So if you're going from 12 seconds to 9 seconds, that's a pretty good reduction. But if you're going from 6-second cooldown to 3-second cooldown on your hook, that's a 50% reduction effectively on your remaining hook. So it's very, very good on him to get that. And he could just go for some pretty good team fight items. You can get like Locket into Redemption and just really do a ton of team fights. And then he just, you know, he just does Thresh things, right? He's got really good hook. You can choose to go in. You can choose to just use it just as kind of poke or peel or semi-engage without fully committing to the fight. And because he doesn't have to fully commit, he doesn't have to build as tanky if he doesn't want to. He's very versatile. So you can get stuff like a Redemption versus a Leona Nautilus are never going to be able to get Redemption. Well, not never, but very unlikely that's going to be the optimal item, because they have to go in. They're going to get hit a lot. But with Thresh, in some types of matchups, you may not have to do that. You may not have to go in. You can just hook and just hang back and peel, and then you could get something like a Redemption to, you know, get that extra utility for your team, or go for something like a McHale. Sometimes people get that on him. So he's pretty good. I just have him a bit lower just because his base stats are going to be significantly lower than something like Rel or Leona or Nautilus. You are going to get busted up in the early game because your base armor is really low. Your health is okay, but yeah, you can do some damage if you know, Flash Flay, Auto Ignite, and, you know, land your hook and stuff like that. Yes, you can do some damage, but it's just, I don't think it's going to be as much as some of the other big boy tanks, unless you just really catch them off guard in the early game. So that can be kind of rough. And it just feels like you're working really hard for what comes easier to other champs, right? Like the Flay is a really odd skill shot that you have to time correctly to try to peel people. The box is okay, but it's not a lockdown piece of CC, right? Like a Leona or a Nautilus or anything like that. Or like even a Maokai ultimate. It doesn't stun or root, it just slows, and it's very close range. So it's hard to use it correctly without putting yourself in danger. But you do have the Lantern as well that you can use offensively to pull people in or defensively to save people. Your allies have to click on the Lantern, which sometimes they will, but I mean, there's definitely some fail cases out there as well, right? So you got to take that into consideration. So he just requires a lot of coordination, a lot of like good game knowledge and decision making on your part and on the part of your allies. You just kind of have to be on the same page to make him work. So I think he is a very strong champ if you're a fantastic Thresh user, especially if you're duoed with a solid AD carry. You know, you could definitely put him up in the A tier, maybe even in the S tier. So he's a great champ. It's just really hard to execute. And his baseline effectiveness is going to be really low. Like, there's no such thing as an average Thresh. You know, there's like a really good Thresh, or there's just like a bad Thresh. Not much in between. Okay, and then Bard is another one that I'll mention here. Bard has fallen off, in my mind, pretty significantly. He's just not as good with some of the mythics as a lot of the other supports are. So, you know, he used to go Athenes into Deadbands or into Rapid Fire Cannon. And, you know, Athenes was removed from the game, which makes his W, like, really, really anemic. It does virtually no healing without Athenes. And then Deadman's is getting nerfed on this patch, primarily because of Udyr and some of these other, you know, bruiser type of champs. But he's definitely going to feel the pain on that. I mean, 75 HP is a big deal to a support. So he has a decent win rate. He still has a good engage with his ultimate. It's just there's a lot of mobility out there right now, and especially with a lot of AD carries still taking Gale Force, they can dodge out of that fairly well. And with things like Kaisa being very popular, she has 2 different ways to dodge it with her ultimate or with her E. And if she takes Gale Force, that's 3 different ways to dodge it. So I just feel like there's just not as many opportunities to land really high quality ultimates as there were last season. And it's decent, but if you get engaged on, you will get blown up by some of these champs right now. Like the Leona, like the Rel, the Nautilus. So he's okay. It's just a lot more conditional than it was last season. So if you like him, you can still make him work. You can still win with him. Just a bit tougher. And then Sona did get buffed a lot last patch. She went up quite a bit as AD carry. As a support, she's kind of, just sort of treading water there. She's decent. If you want a premier champion that can poke and put on a lot of pressure in the early game, is pretty good. If you get a lot of souls, you can do some pretty decent damage later on in the game. Big problem is her items are just so expensive, though. And that's where you start to get into a lot of these champions. Can be good, but a lot of their items are going to be expensive. Not all of them. Like Sona does have cheap items. She's got other issues, but I think Divine Sunder is the best thing you can get on her right now, from what I remember, and it's like 3,300 gold, maybe 3,400 gold, maybe 32. I don't remember, but it's over 3,000 gold. So it's decent, but all of her items are going to be so expensive, so you really have to get kills, or at least force a lot of assists. Now, you do get some extra gold from the souls, and they did increase that amount. So, in the mid-game, if you have 50 or 60 souls, that is going to be 300 or 400 extra gold. So, that is nice. That is nice for sure. But, I don't know. She's really vulnerable to all ends and to flanks. And, it's really going to be hard to get vision with her. Like, it's going to be very risky later on. And your items are just really expensive and don't do a lot for your team. They help you out personally, but it's not going to help out as much as Moonstone or Mandate or Locket or anything like that. So she's okay. If you're really good on her, you can make her work, but there are probably going to be better options out there. And then Swain is someone who is actually pretty strong right now into certain matchups. I know I hate going against him as Maokai, but that E and the pull, if he has any sort of burst with him in the lane, if it's a Misfortune or a Jhin or Tristana or whatever, and he gets that pull, it's really dangerous. And like a lot of these top end champs, he can engage through the minion wave, so he can just stand right up there on the wave, and if you dare walk up and try to get any CS and he has any sort of aim, it's going to be very difficult to dodge that. It's got a huge hitbox on that E, so he has a lot of kill potential in the early game. He works really well with Demonic Embrace. I don't think he would take Mandate because he doesn't have a lot of slows in his kit. He does have his W and his E, I suppose. Probably just take a Leandries, although that doesn't have health on it. I'm honestly not sure what he's going to take as his mythic, but I do know that Demonic Embrace is very good on him later, so we'll see. Very good kill potential early, can serve as an off tank later on. Maybe he does go. I'll tell you what, let me just look, since I do have it's pulled up right here. Maybe he does just go Mandate. No, it looks like he does like the Leandries. Even though it doesn't have the HP on it, it is significantly better than Mandate. So yeah, you just do the Leandries. Just the burn, and I guess when you get Hourglass later on, maybe you don't need the survivability as much. But yeah, good all-in burst champ. Yes, he does fix the camera there. Yes, his items are a bit more expensive, but he does have the potential to get those kills pretty easily with his E in the laning phase. So, pretty good mage. Zyra, gonna have a lot of harassment early on with the plants. Good vision check with the plants later. The CDR is really nice on some of these items, but yeah, it's gonna be expensive, right? Not a great Mandate user. Brand, not a great Mandate user. They really want Leandries, and that's 3,400 gold instead of 2,500 for Mandate. So that's why I have them a little bit lower. They are very strong, especially in team fights. They're really good at harassing in the lane. It's just if you don't get the kills, you're gonna fall behind because your items are more expensive. Now, Set is someone who could maybe be a little bit higher. The Kim Tank buff was actually extremely good for him. Went from 3,200 to 2,800, and if he does get up close and he can pull you in, and then he could tackle you back into his team, he can be pretty good. He put out some pretty good damage later on, so you could definitely make an argument for him being as high as tier 2 if you're very good on him and you have the right kind of comp. But his items are still going to be a little expensive, and Dead Man's is going to be a lot worse on this patch. So I think he went Kim Tank into Dead Man's before, so he'll get dinged a little bit, but overall he'll still be pretty good if you want that type of bruiser, bot lane. Gragas is one who kind of, like, he's been rising to prominence a little bit in pro play. His solo queue is still very few people play him. He's got a 50% win rate. So he does have good engage potential with his ultimate. His body slam is a displacement, so that can help you out against, Leona or Nautilus or just some of these other hook champions that can help you peel a little bit. His barrel feels like it's probably pretty lackluster, I imagine, as a support. I think you're going to max your E first. And then your W is going to be a little lackluster. You're just not going to be able to get as tanky as he is in the top lane right now, which is his best role. So he's okay. I just feel like there are probably going to be better options most of the time. And if you like him, you can probably make him work. Galio is another one who is really popular in pro, but I hesitate to recommend him in solo queue. He does do a lot of damage, but he does have long cooldowns, especially his ultimate's very long, and it's really conditional. You have to have a teammate that you can trust is going to go in there. So he can be very good, with something like a Hecarim or a Jarvan or just any other type of engaged champ, but that's really kind of lacking in a lot of positions right now. You're not seeing a ton of engage in the top. There's a little bit more in the jungle recently with like Udyr and Skarner, like some of these Kim tanks are coming up in popularity, but he's just a little more conditional, although he can be pretty good, especially against a heavy magic damage team. Sona's another one who's getting a pretty decent win rate right now, and if she goes unchecked, she can be super strong. Obviously with Moonstone, you're throwing out all kinds of extra damage and healing and shielding with your W and your Q. You can take, Guardian plus Barrier and get the same kind of protection as Seraphine. I just think Seraphine's a little bit better because she has a longer range, bigger hitbox ultimate. And her mana costs are a lot more manageable with your Q spam early on versus Sona's mana costs are extremely high in the early game. So I just think Seraphine's just a better version of Sona and Lux kind of hybrid right now. But if you do like Sona, if she goes unchecked in a team fight, she will probably be the best support. If just like no one touches her and she just gets to spam in a team fight that lasts longer than 5 seconds and she's touching like 3 or 4 people with her auras, it's extremely powerful. Like, it's so many stats, especially with Moonstone. So I think she's got a decent win rate right now. She's just a little too vulnerable for my taste, but if you think it's going to be a slow game and you're going to be able to have these longer fights, that can work. Lux is someone I've not seen in quite a while as a support. I know that like Bizzleberry is pretty big on her. But she's just really skill shot dependent. You got to hit your Qs, you got to hit your Es. She's really mana intensive in the early game with the Es. I just feel like Seraphine's just going to be a better version of that. And possibly even Nami. Nami is closer range, but she has like more guaranteed harassment with her W, and she has like the pick potential, with her Q. Right? So yes, Lux does get a 2-second bind that can hit multiple people from a long range, which is nice. But Nami also has like a 1.5 second bubble. So I don't know. She's okay. It's like, what do you get on her though? Like you can do mandate, but it's a little more conditional, right? I mean, I guess your E is pretty like, if you can aim your E properly, you're probably going to be able to hit that pretty consistently. So I don't know. She's okay. I mean, maybe you could make the case to put her in tier 2, but she just feels a little too susceptible to all-ins to me and a little too skill shot reliant. And then Pike can be really good if you get ahead, but the items on ADs aren't that great right now. They did buff Umbral, so that does help out some. But I guess you'd just probably go like Duskblade. I'm not really sure what you'd get on him, but either way, you're paying up. It's going to be expensive. It's the same story as a lot of these other damage champs down here. It's like if you can't use Mandate as your damage item, then you're going to be paying in the 3,000s, and that's going to put you behind a lot of other champs. So he's okay. If you snowball, you get a lot of extra gold, but it's just going to be harder, I think. And then Blitzcrank, it's not that he's bad. Like, you can land your hook, and you do, you're going to get a kill probably if you land your hook. It's just that he basically has one ability, right? Like, you hit your hook, and it's you kill him, or you have nothing left. It's not quite that extreme, but it's kind of rough. Versus, I feel like some of these other champs just have similarly strong engages, but they just have a lot more in their kit. You know, like Leona, Nautilus, Alistar, Thresh. You know, a lot of these champs are just going to have, like, just more stuff they can do other than just hit the hook or miss. So, anyways. All right, well, I'll go ahead and end it there. It is, I will keep it under an hour, so at least I have the visual representation. I think I talked about way more champions than I usually do. Usually I only get like 10. I think this time I probably got somewhere close to 20 different champions I was able to say at least a little bit about. So hopefully that was enjoyable. I guess the last couple of honorable mentions that I'll talk about here. Karma has been buffed a couple of times. Is she getting buffed on this patch, I think? Yes, we'll see. The mana cost is going lower. I mean, maybe you could make an argument for putting Karma up here in B tier. You know, I'll go ahead and tentatively put her up here because I think she has the kind of kit that could be pretty decent. You know, she can speed people up, sort of like Lulu, but she just doesn't have that hard CC. She doesn't have any buffs that she puts on her allies in terms of the attack speed on the Lulu or the movement and attack speed on Yuumi and all that stuff. So, I don't know. But she is very, very strong in the early game. So if you do push your advantage, you know, land a lot of your Qs, poke them out, get a big lead for you and your AD carry, then, you know, she can be valuable. But kind of falls off in a lot of situations late game if you don't take advantage of her power early. And then, you know, Janna's okay. She just really lacks an engage. Yes, Mandate's pretty good on her. I mean, I guess you could put her like B tier, A tier. I just don't like it because she has no engage, no way to speed up her allies. But she's okay. Morgana's a decent counter pick champion, but I feel like you're just paying way too much for that black shield. It's like, it's okay, but her like W might as well not even be an ability outside the landing phase, and then her R is like super close range. So she's okay into stuff like a Leona or a Nautilus or an Alistar. She's all right, but I feel like you're just being too reactive. Like, you're not being proactive enough on Morgana. So, like, yes, if you land your Q, it is a nice bind. Like, she's not terrible. I just feel like she's a counterpick champ, and it just feels like you're playing scared when you're playing Morgana. I'd rather just fight fire with fire most of the time, but she's okay. Braum, Peeler tank. He's okay with Lucian. I think there are going to be better tanks. I think Rel's just a better version of something like Braum right now. Soraka has just really been hammered hard by a lot of the grievous wounds, and the putrefier buffs are not going to help that. So she just needs a light rework. They buffed her healing up, but I just think too many people are going to have grievous wounds, and she just doesn't bring enough to the table right now. Zillion, kind of like Morgana in my mind, you're paying a really heavy price to get that revive, which in some comps can be very good, right? If you're really trying to protect this hyper carry and they are all in on like burst, you know, he can hard counter another champ, but I feel like it's just a little too reactive. I mean, yes, you can make your own plays if you double bomb somebody, and the slow is nice. Like, he does have stuff, you know, that he can do, but I feel like his power level is just indexed too much towards his ult, and, you know, he just might fall short of utility compared to some of the other champs out there. Pantheon has been nerfed quite a lot. He's just super all in on the early game. He's just really cheesy. If you're going against a tank, it's going to be very difficult, so he's really hard to blind pick. And even if they take like double armor runes, if you're against something like Seraphine, and she takes double armor runes and just plays like really cautiously and has Guardian and Barrier and whatever, you know, they can just give up like 15 CS in the laning phase, and it's just not going to matter once she gets Moonstone and, you know, Staff of Flowing Water later on. Like, you're just done, you know, unless you get a lot of kills, you're just worthless late game. And then Tarik's like, okay, kind of in the Braum camp. He's just being outshined, I think, by some of these other tanks that are out there right now. But it definitely is possible to win with him if you do have the right kind of comp. But you have to be really organized. Your team has to make very good use of your invulnerability ultimate, but he can be okay. Then you have kind of the poke, like the lane domination crew with the Xerath and the Vel'Koz. If you want that type of thing, you know, the AP lane dominant, you don't want to play Maokai or he's banned, you don't want to play Seraphine for whatever reason, then I'd rather just play like Zyra or Brands, just because I think they're just a little more consistent and bring more to team fights. But they're okay. I mean, you're going to win lane. You play Xerath or Vel'Koz, if you're decent on them, you're going to win lane. But I feel like they're just really vulnerable to flanks. Their items are very expensive, and, you know, they just don't bring a lot to team fights. right? I mean, Vel'Koz with channeling his ult can do a ton of damage if you go unchecked, so that can be pretty good. Combined with something like a Misfortune, like there are definitely combinations that can be good. Or like, you know, Xerath's ultimate with Jin's ultimate can be very good. So it's not those champs can be good. I just think that they're a little more situational. But anyways, okay, that's going to be it. I do want to make sure that I get this done in an hour, but I wanted to get through as many different champions as I can. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this new format? What do you think about my list? You know, what do you think I'm overlooking? What should I try out? And then come by, check out the stream. Starts every night around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on YouTube. Very friendly, chill community. I'd love to see you out there. Love to discuss some of these things with you, figure out what new cool things you discovered. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.